Many years ago, among a box of forgotten papers passed to me by a distant relative, I discovered this slim, leather-bound journal. The edges browned, its pages softened by handling, and its cord worn thin with time. There was nothing remarkable in its appearance. Indeed, at first I set it aside, believing it to be some travel record or commonplace book of no interest. Only later, in a moment of idle curiosity, did I open it. The handwriting within was careful, deliberate, touched with the small hesitations of a gentleman accustomed to writing by candlelight. The entries were dated in the autumn of 1900, and the first several pages contained notes on Japanese antiquities, brief sketches of lacquerwork, and observations on coastal towns. But several pages in, the character of the writing changed. The measured tone gave way to something else, an unease that grew line by line, until the entries no longer resembled scholarly notes, but a confession written under the pressure of some haunting recollection. I found myself compelled to read further. It is from this journal that the following account is taken. I have resisted the temptation to embellish or interpret, and present it here almost exactly as it was written, save for the occasional adjustment of clarity. What follows begins innocently enough: an academic journey, a translator, a remote house overlooking the sea. But the writer returns again and again to a single sound, that of a knuckle tapping lightly upon the side of a glass. And from that moment, the tone of the journal darkens. I will read to you now from this account. It was at a certain winter gathering in London, filled with laughter, warm lamps, and the dull roar of conversation, that the memory returned to me with a force I had not anticipated. A gentleman at the far end of the banquet table had risen to propose a toast. To summon attention, he tapped the rim of a champagne glass with the back of his ring. That was all. A simple, harmless gesture. Yet the sound struck me like a blow to the chest. It carried me back through 20 years and more, to a lonely wooden house on the northern coast of Japan, to the winter seas, the shuddering pines, the strange cold that seeped under the doors, and to Lady Akiyama. My companions at the table noticed my sudden stillness, though none could guess its cause. How could they? For there are memories one does not share lightly. Tales one carries alone, but share it I must. And so I set down the tale now, while the echo of that glass still trembles in my ears. In the autumn of 1900, I traveled to the small town of Iwanaga on the northern coast of Japan, to examine a private collection of manuscripts and household relics. My Japanese was serviceable but imperfect, so the university arranged for a translator, Haru Kurokawa, to accompany me. A young man of quick wit and quicker temper, and a certain hardness beneath the skin. We rode through cedar forests and along winding coastal paths until the sea revealed itself below, grey, vast, eternal. Perched high above it stood Akiyama House. It was a long, low structure of darkened timber, its roof heavy with weathered tiles. Moss clung to the stone steps that approached it. Shoji screens glowed dimly from within, and the veranda creaked as though the house had grown accustomed to solitude. Pines bent over it like silent sentries. There was something observant in the house's posture, something that watched. Our host, Mr. Kondo, met us at the entrance. He was perhaps in his late 50s, a slim, soft-spoken man with silver-threaded hair and an expression of gentle gravity. His bow was deep and sincere, his movements precise. I remember now that at times his eyes would drift to the corners of rooms before settling on us, as if ensuring nothing lingered too close. "You honor this house by coming," he said, with a formal warmth. "I trust you will find comfort here during your work." As we approached the entrance, he made one request. "I ask that you not disturb Lady Akiyama. She rests often and suffers from terrible migraines. She does not receive visitors." His voice faltered slightly, and we politely agreed. Haru and I spent 2 full days working together in a small study overlooking the sea. It was beautiful work, quiet, scholarly, absorbing. And Kondo's collection was unusual for a private home. A ceremonial sake cup bearing a faded inscription to a long-lost benefactor, a set of carved ivory seals bearing the crest of the Akiyama family, letters exchanged between Akiyama daughters and their husbands, and a small bundle of poems attributed to a woman named Chiyo. The poems were remarkable, quiet verses about the sea, plum blossoms, and longing. We studied and archived for 3 days, and then, on the 3rd night, everything changed. After Haru had fallen asleep, I heard it. A soft, crystalline tap. I sat upright. Sound drifted along the corridor, like a finger sliding over glass. I stepped out with my lamp. The hall stretched long, faintly flickering with candlelight. Then movement. A woman, in a pale kimono patterned with wisteria, glided silently down the far end of the corridor. Her face, delicate, lowered. Her black hair glimmered like ink. "Lady Akiyama," I whispered. But she did not hear. She did not turn. She passed like a sigh into darkness. The next morning, when I mentioned having seen Lady Akiyama to Mr. Kondo, he merely bowed. "Lady Akiyama rests. She rarely comes out. She has asked that she is not disturbed." Haru grew uneasy that day. I noticed him often staring into corners as if expecting something unpleasant to emerge. "You look troubled," I said, but he brushed it off. But that night, while we drank tea by the hearth, he told me more. "Old houses unsettle me. They don't let you rest. The air is wrong. I hear noises that I can't make sense of. Groans behind walls, whispers over my shoulder. There's something evil in this house, and the moment I think I see it, fades like smoke in the wind." Haru's voice trembled slightly as he finished. "Old sounds follow people," he said, "sometimes across generations." I poured him a cup of sake, but he shifted farther away from me. Forlorn, quiet, he asked, "Do you think the bad things we do follow us through life?" I started to understand in that moment the fear beneath the bravado. The next night, fog pressed thick against the windows. The pines moaned like living things. Sometime after midnight, a cry echoed from the woods behind the house. Raw, wordless, almost human. I woke Haru. "Did you hear that?" He stiffened. "I hear it. I've heard it every night." And then the glass. This time, I remained frozen on my futon. We worked in silence the next day, afraid of the coming night. But when it came, I waited for that chime. It was undeniably summoning. Sharp. Deliberate. Rising. I followed the sound through a corridor washed in moonlight, stopping at a half-open shoji screen. Inside, a soft lamp illuminated a single figure. She was there. The woman in the wisteria-patterned kimono. She turned at the sound of my approach, and her expression, surprise, then gentle delight, bathed the room in warmth. "Good evening," she said softly. "Please, do not stand in the doorway. Come inside." I obeyed, barely aware of my own movements. She motioned for me to sit opposite her on a low cushion. The lamp illuminated her face, elegant, serene, and touched by a quiet sadness. She began with a smile. "You are far from home," she said. "Tell me about it." And we talked. She asked about England, the smell of the heather fields, the way snow fell on quiet mornings, the sound of church bells on winter evenings. She listened with a hunger I could feel, like someone reaching through time for memories not her own. And as the night continued, so did the conversation, and I asked her about Iwanaga as it once was. Her stories painted the house in brighter colours, evenings with lanterns burning, dances on festival nights, her mother humming old lullabies while brushing her long hair. Her laughter was light and unguarded. She moved closer, enough that I felt the faint warmth of her presence. "You speak so gently," she said. "You remind me of someone my mother once knew." There was tenderness in her voice. Only much later, when the lamplight dimmed, did her expression change. A faint terror passed through her lips. "I must tell you something," she whispered, and the room chilled. "There is a danger in this house for me and for my daughter." She reached out, almost touching my hand. "I fear for our lives." Her eyes filled with a haunted dread that pierced me. The warmth between us remained, but it flickered with a terrible vulnerability. "There's a woman in this house, older than I am. Chio-san. I see evil behind her eyes, and she looks at me with such hatred." A soft creak was heard just by the door. A thought came to me that someone had been listening outside. "Stay with me tonight," she murmured. "Just until I fall asleep. I do not wish to be alone." So I stayed. She lay upon the futon, breathing softly. I remained seated beside her, watching her with a tenderness I cannot fully describe. For a time, the air was calm, but as the hours passed, the cold crept in. Not ordinary cold. This was the cold of a well left open in winter, of deep ocean water, untouched by sun. Her breath grew faint, the windows trembled, and the lantern guttered. The cold pressed against me until my bones ached. "I will return," I whispered, "just for blankets." But she did not stir. But the lantern flickered once, like a warning. With a heart heavy and strangely breaking, I slipped from the room and returned to my quarters, collapsing into a shivering half-sleep. From far down the corridor, faint as memory, the glass chimed, as though acknowledging my departure. The next morning, I sought Mr. Kondo and informed him of my meeting with Lady Akiyama. Kondo stared in confusion. "Her daughter, sir?" "She mentioned danger, that she feared for both their lives." Kondo looked troubled, almost afraid. "Sir, Lady Akiyama is childless. I fear that you have succumbed to an ill night's sleep." I asked Mr. Kondo as politely as I could whether Lady Akiyama might receive a brief visit. I intended nothing more than to thank her for her hospitality and inquire after her health. Kondo paused in the middle of adjusting a vase on a low table and seemed momentarily uncertain. "I will ask," he said at last. "Please wait here, if you would be so kind." He slid the door to her chambers shut behind him. I remained in the corridor alone. At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly from beyond the paper screens came a sound that made my throat tighten. A labored inhalation. A wheeze. The unmistakable rasp of someone struggling for breath. I heard Kondo murmur softly, soothingly, though his exact words escaped me. A low moan followed, raw and pained. Then something heavier, a dull throb of anguish, like a body shifting in discomfort. I stepped forward instinctively to help, but stopped myself. It was not my place. Moments later, the shoji door opened just an inch, and as Kondo prepared to exit, the movement lifted the screen enough for a sliver of the room to reveal itself, and for the briefest instant, I saw a hand, a thin, grey, almost skeletal hand, resting upon the bedsheets, veins raised, skin parchment dry. Kondo stepped out and closed the screen with quiet firmness. Lady Akiyama apologizes, he said with a bow. Her headache grew suddenly worse. She must rest. She cannot receive anyone today. I nodded, though my mind reeled. Haru had grown increasingly uneasy. He tried to hide it, but more than once I caught him pressing his palms against his temples as though trying to push away some memory that refused to be buried. There was a heaviness in him, a shadow I had mistaken for mere melancholy when we first arrived. Now it looked more like dread. We should leave this house, he said to me as we prepared to sleep. I have felt something watching us, watching you. It was the last night he slept in that room. In the morning, I asked Mr. Kondo if Lady Akiyama might be well enough to receive another brief visit. Kondo stiffened. Sir, he said, more firmly than before, Lady Akiyama does not receive visitors during daylight hours. She must not be disturbed. His tone left no room for negotiation, but his eyes, they carried something like pity. For whom? I could not tell. That night was the first since our arrival that the house remained utterly silent. No wind rattled the shutters, no beams creaked, no footfalls whispered along the hall, and most unnervingly of all, the glass did not chime. The stillness pressed upon me. Somewhere in the small hours, I stirred from a restless sleep. In the half-dreaming darkness, I thought or imagined that I heard Haru rise from his futon. Soft footsteps, a sliding door, a faint exhalation, as though he were steeling himself. By morning, his bedding was untouched, smoothed by a careful hand. We later found him at the edge of the woods, slumped against the trunk of a cedar tree. His head was bowed as though in contemplation. His hands rested loosely on his lap. Dead. There was no mark on him. But Mr. Kondo, pale as ash, whispered only one sentence. Lady Akiyama requests your presence now. A coldness passed through me. No, I whispered. No, Kondo-san, I cannot. Not after this. I must leave at once. I stood, half determined to gather my things and flee the house entirely, but Kondo raised a trembling hand. Please, he said. She insists upon it now. And he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. She says you must hear what she has to tell you. That only you will understand. I knew with dreadful clarity that if I left now, I would never escape the memory of this place. The unfinished weight of it would cling to me all my life. Whatever truth waited behind that door, I had to face it. I will go, I said quietly. Kondo bowed again. Relief and sorrow mingled in the gesture, and he led me down the corridor. The shoji screen to Lady Akiyama's chambers slid open with a hesitant rustle. When I entered, my breath caught. The lady in the room was old. She looked impossibly small, impossibly fragile. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. Inside, the room smelled faintly of incense and old tatami. The light was dim. A single oil lamp flickered beside her. Sit with me, she said. Her voice, though thin, carried a peculiar steadiness. I knelt before her. For a long moment, she said nothing. She studied my face as though reading a text only she could decipher. Then her gaze softened. She leaned in. You have heard the glass chime, I answered. You have seen her, she said. There was no question in the statement. In a cracked voice, she asked me to describe the woman I had spoken with. She listened to my account with trembling hands, and her eyes filled with tears. You have described my mother, she said, exactly as she was 80 years ago, and a chill passed through me. My mother was a gentle woman, she began, but she died in terror. And terror, when held too long, can distort even the kindest soul. She looked toward the shuttered window. She sought companionship in her loneliness. She sought warmth in the cold. But some companionships became cruel. She was murdered in this house. Lady Akiyama continued, her glass poisoned. Murdered by a woman twisted and corrupted by jealousy. Shio was her name. She loved my father and would stop at nothing to get him. Her voice fell to a whisper. I was there, around the table with all the dinner guests. My mother raised her glass for a toast and drank. My throat tightened. And Haru? She lowered her eyes. My mother, she whispered. She appears beautiful to some. That is how I knew her. But she appears to those she blames as something else. Your friend carried burdens he never wished to confess. My mother knew the weight of a troubled heart. She feared what harm he might bring, even unknowingly. I felt a sickening lurch within me. Why did she come to me? I asked, barely able to speak. Lady Akiyama closed her eyes. She will trouble you no more, she said, but she will remember you, as I hope you will remember her. A strange, aching warmth rose in my chest. Grief for someone I had not truly known, and yet had known intimately in the span of a few impossible nights. I bowed my head. I will remember, I said. So back in London, as the champagne glass chimed under the host's ring, I felt the cold of that Japanese room again. I remembered her soft voice, the warmth of her presence beside me, the tender sorrow in her smile. And I wondered, did she walk still, guarding the lonely? Or had she finally found peace after claiming one more soul? The host tapped the glass again. And across the banquet table, for the briefest moment, I saw a figure in Mysterio watching me. And then she was gone.